The galactic arm was quiet. This quiet was a precious thing. For 300 years it had been kept by a silent promise. The promise was not made with words or treaties. It was made with a single silent object. The object was called the Eternity. It drifted in the dark space between human territory and the land of the Cathar Imperium. It did not look like a ship of war. It was shaped like a great sleeping dragon from an old story. Its body was long and curved. Its head was tucked down as if in a deep dream. Its hull was dark and cold with no lights, no engines, no signs of life. It was just there. A monument. A reminder. The reminder was this: if a great darkness ever came to the galaxy, the Eternity would wake up. What it would do then, no one knew. Humanity, who had built it or perhaps only found it, was gone. They had vanished long ago, leaving only this silent guardian behind. Most races saw it as a myth, a story to tell their young, but the story held the peace. No one dared to test it. A small space station hung in the shadow of the Great Guardian. This was Watchtower Station. Its job was simple: watch the Eternity and report. Nothing ever happened. The crew was small. Captain Mirai sat in her chair on the command deck. She was a calm woman with a steady face. She looked at the main screen, which showed the sleeping form of the Eternity. It was a view she knew very well. "Any changes?" she asked. She asked this every day. At the communications panel, a young man named Jin shook his head. "No, Captain. All readings are silent. Same as always." Jin was good with sounds and signals. He often listened to the empty space around the Eternity, hoping to hear something. He never did. At the tactical station, a man named Chul looked at his own screens. "I am picking up something," he said, his voice low and serious. "Not from the Guardian. From the edge of the system, a fleet. It is the Cathar." Mirai's calm face did not change, but she sat up straighter. "The Cathar? They are not scheduled for a visit." "They are not asking for permission," Chul said. "They are coming in fast, and their weapons are powered up." A feeling of cold worry filled the command deck. The Cathar Imperium was proud and strong. They had a large military. They believed they were the most powerful race in the galaxy. They did not like the Eternity. They saw it as a sign that they were not the top power. They saw it as an insult. Down in engineering, a woman named Tay saw the energy spike on her own monitors. She was the chief engineer. She kept the old station running. She listened to the captain's channel on her comm unit. Her hands moved quickly over her controls. "The station's shields are at full power, Captain," she said. "But they will not hold against a Cathar battleship. Not for long. Hold position, Tay," Mirai said, "and be ready." On the main screen, the view changed. Now it showed the Cathar fleet. There were 12 big warships. They were sharp and angular, painted in dark colors. They looked like knives cutting through the void. At the front was their flagship, the Voice of Strength. "Incoming transmission from the Cathar flagship," Jin said. "It is Ambassador Kale." "Put him on screen," Mirai said. The face that appeared was not human. It was covered in fine green scales. His eyes were yellow, with black slits for pupils. He looked proud and angry. "Captain Mirai of Watchtower Station," Kale said, his voice a hissing sound. "We have come to end this farce." "Ambassador Kale," Mirai replied, her voice even and calm. "This is a place of peace. You are not welcome with weapons ready." Kyle made a sharp, cutting motion with his clawed hand. "Peace, it is not peace. It is a threat. It is a thing your dead race left here to frighten us. We have lived under the shadow of this scarecrow for too long. Today we remove the shadow." Mirai felt a chill. This was what they had always feared. "Ambassador, you do not understand what you are doing. The Eternity is not a scarecrow. It is a guardian. Its purpose is a mystery. Firing on it is not a show of strength. It is the worst mistake you can make." "A mistake?" Kale hissed. "We do not make mistakes. We do not fear the ghosts of a dead species. Your humanity is gone. Their time is over. It is our time now, and we will prove it by destroying their last empty monument." "It is not empty," Jin said softly from his station, but no one heard him. "Stand down your weapons, Ambassador," Mirai said, her voice becoming harder. "Withdraw from this space. This is your only warning." Kale laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "You have nothing to warn us with, Captain. You have an old station and a story. We have a fleet. The galaxy will watch, and they will see that the Cathar do not bow to stories." The screen went dark. The communication was over. He cut the link, Jin said. On the screen, the Cathar ships moved into attack formation. The fronts of their ships began to glow with a bright, hot light. They are charging their plasma cannons, Chul reported, his voice tight. They are targeting the Eternity. Can we stop them? Mirai asked, though she already knew the answer. No, Captain, Chul said. Our weapons are for small asteroids. We cannot even scratch their shields. Jin, open a general channel, Mirai ordered. All frequencies. Maybe someone else out there can hear this. Maybe they can bear witness. Jin's fingers flew. Channel open. Mirai took a deep breath. She spoke clearly into the silence of the command deck. This is Captain Mirai of Watchtower Station. The Cathar Imperium is about to commit an act of unthinkable aggression against humanity's final guardian, the Eternity. We have tried to reason with them. They will not listen. We record this now for all of history. Let it be known that we tried to stop this madness. As she finished speaking, the Cathar fleet fired. 12 lances of pure, white-hot energy shot across the black space. They were so bright it hurt to look at them. They moved in perfect silence. They were the most powerful weapons the Cathar had. They could burn the surface of a world, turning oceans to steam and land to glass. The plasma beam struck the Eternity directly in its chest. The light that exploded was blinding. Watchtower Station shook violently. Alarms blared as the station's systems were overloaded by the energy wash. The main screen turned white, then filled with static. Mirai held onto her chair. Jin and Chul were thrown forward in their seats. Down in engineering, Tay grabbed a handrail to keep from falling. Report, Mirai shouted over the noise of the alarms. Chul was the first to get his systems back. He worked quickly, his face grim. The energy spike was off the scale, Captain. I have never seen anything like it. The shaking slowly stopped. The alarms quieted. The static on the main screen cleared. Everyone on the command deck looked at the screen. Their hearts were pounding. The view was once again of the Eternity, hanging in the silence of space. It was completely untouched. There was not a single mark on its dark hull. No scorch marks, no broken pieces, nothing. It looked exactly as it had for 300 years. The most powerful attack the Cathar could muster had done less than nothing. It was as if they had thrown a pebble at a mountain. For a long moment, there was only a deep, stunned silence on the command deck. Jin let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Chul just stared, his mouth slightly open. Then a soft glow appeared on Jin's communications panel. A light he had never seen before. It was a soft, gentle blue. Captain, he whispered, his voice full of awe. I am getting an energy reading from the Eternity. Internal power, it's starting. Deep within the core of the great sleeping dragon, a single soft blue light ignited. It pulsed once, slow and steady, like the first heartbeat of a newborn giant. The galaxy had held its breath for 300 years. Now its guardian was taking its first breath, and the silence that followed was more terrifying than any war cry. The silence on the command deck was heavy and thick. It was the silence of shock. On the main screen, the Eternity hung in the void, its dark hull unmarked by the Cathar's attack. It looked exactly the same as it had for centuries, but something was different. Everyone could feel it. Jin was the first to break the silence. His voice was a hushed whisper. The internal power reading, it's getting stronger. He pointed to his screen, where a soft blue light pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm. It was coming from the very heart of the Guardian. Captain Mirai leaned forward in her chair, her eyes fixed on the screen. Magnify the view. Focus on the core section. Chul worked his controls. The image on the screen shifted, zooming in on the center of the massive structure. There, where before there had been only darkness, a soft blue glow was now visible. It was like a single star had been lit inside the sleeping dragon. It is awake, Chul said, his voice full of wonder and fear. Down in engineering, Tay saw the same thing on her monitors. The station's sensors, which had always shown the Eternity as a cold, dead rock, were now going wild. Energy levels were climbing faster and faster. Captain, she said over the comm, the energy signature is unlike anything I have ever seen. It is not plasma, not fusion. I do not know what it is. On the main screen, the view of the Eternity began to change. The soft blue light from its core started to spread. It moved outward along ancient hidden pathways. Thin lines of light appeared on the dark hull. They looked like veins of liquid energy. They flowed across the surface, connecting and branching, forming intricate patterns. The patterns looked like circuits or maybe scales. The Cathar fleet had not moved. For a few seconds, they were as still and silent as the Guardian they had attacked. Then on the main screen, a new signal flashed. "Incoming transmission from the Cathar flagship," Jin said. "It is Ambassador Kale again." "Put him on," Mirai said, her voice tight. Kale's scaled face appeared. His yellow eyes were wide. The pride was gone, replaced by confusion and a growing anger. "What trick is this?" he hissed. "Some kind of shield? A hologram?" "It is not a trick, Ambassador," Mirai said, her voice calm but firm. "You were warned. You have woken it. Stand down now. Withdraw your fleet. It may not be too late." "Too late?" Kale's voice rose to a shriek. "We are the Cathar. We do not run from lights. All ships, target that energy source. Full barrage fire." On the screen, the Cathar warships glowed again. Their plasma cannons charged, building up even more power than before. The light was so bright it lit up the dark sides of the eternity. "They are firing again," Joel warned. This time, the volley of plasma beams was even more powerful. 12 lances of destruction shot across space, aimed directly at the glowing core of the eternity, but the beams never reached their target. A kilometer in front of the eternity's hull, the space itself seemed to shimmer. It was like looking through heat haze on a summer day. Then the shimmer solidified into a vast, beautiful web of hexagonal light. Each hexagon was the size of a city block. The shield was a pale, shimmering blue, the same color as the light inside the Guardian. The plasma beams struck the hexagonal shield. There was no explosion. There was no sound. There was no flash of light. The powerful beams which could melt continents simply vanished into the shield. The hexagons glowed softly for a moment, absorbing the incredible energy and then returned to their pale, shimmering state. It was as if the shield had drunk the attack. It had consumed the fire of a fleet without a single ripple. The command deck was utterly silent once more. This was not a technology they understood. This was not a shield that blocked or reflected. This was something that simply made an attack, ceased to exist. Then, the eternity moved. It was not a movement like a ship. There was no roar of engines, no flare of thrusters. The entire structure, a thing the size of a small moon, simply reoriented itself. It was smooth and silent and impossibly fast. The great head, which had been tucked down in sleep for 300 years, lifted. It turned slowly until it was facing the Cathar fleet. Where its eyes would be, 2 pools of that same serene blue light now glowed. They were not angry lights. They were not violent. They were calm and deep, like the eyes of an ancient, patient creature. They focused on the Cathar ships, and then a voice spoke. It did not come from the speakers on the command deck. It did not come from Jin's communication panel. It was a voice that appeared inside their minds. It was in the air around them. It was everywhere at once. It was a voice that had no gender. It was not old and it was not young. It was the voice of space itself, calm and immense and utterly neutral. The voice spoke in perfect, clear Korean. At the same time, Jin knew it was speaking in the clicking language of the Cathar, and in every other language of every being in the solar system. "Query," the voice said. It was not loud, but it was everywhere. "Why do you strike at a guardian in its slumber?" The question hung in the air. It was a simple question, a reasonable question, but the way it was asked, the power behind it made it the most terrifying thing any of them had ever heard. On the Cathar flagship, the view on the screen showed chaos. Ambassador Kale was staring, his mouth open. He was shouting orders, but no sound came from the transmission. His crew was scrambling, their movements frantic and panicked. On Watchtower Station, the crew was frozen, listening to the echo of the voice in their minds. Jin was the first to find his voice. It asked a question," he whispered. Mirai took a deep, shaky breath. The immense presence of the voice was almost too much to bear. It was like standing at the foot of a mountain that had just spoken. She looked at her crew. Tay's face was pale on the engineering monitor. Joel's hands were clenched into fists on his console. "It's not attacking," Joel said, his voice low with disbelief. "It asked a question." "It is assessing the situation," Mirai said, understanding dawning on her. "It is trying to understand what happened." The eternity did not move again. Its great head remained lifted, its blue eyes watching the Cathar fleet. It was waiting. The hexagonal shield still hung in space, shimmering softly. The Cathar ships were still. Their weapons were dark. They looked very small and very fragile next to the awakened Guardian. The voice did not speak again. The silence returned, but it was a different silence now. It was the silence of a courtroom after a judge has asked a very important question. It was the silence of waiting for an answer. And everyone on the station and on the Cathar ships and on every world watching the live feed knew that the next move would decide everything. The galaxy was no longer holding its breath. It was waiting for an answer to a question that could change the fate of stars. The silence after the voice spoke was deeper than any space. It was a heavy, waiting silence. The eternity did not move. Its great head, with eyes of calm blue light, watched the Cathar fleet. The Cathar ships hung in the void, dark and still. They looked like toys next to the awakened guardian. On the command deck of Watchtower Station, no one moved. The voice was gone from their minds, but the feeling of it remained. It was like the air after a thunderstorm. Jin was the first to shake himself out of the shock. He looked at his communication panel. The lights were going crazy. "Captain," he said, his voice rough. "We are getting signals from everywhere. Every news channel in the galaxy is showing this." "They are all watching." Mirai nodded slowly. Her eyes were still on the main screen, on the silent eternity. "They are waiting for an answer," she said. The Guardian asked a question. Someone needs to answer. She took a deep breath. She had to be the one. She was the human captain. The Guardian knew humanity. She turned to Jin. "Open a channel. Direct it towards the eternity. Use all the power we have." Jin's fingers flew over the controls. "Channel open, Captain." Mirai stood up. She faced the main screen as if she were facing the Guardian itself. Her voice was clear and strong, but inside she felt very small. "Guardian," she began. "I am Captain Mirai of humanity. We are the crew of Watchtower Station. The one who fired upon you was Ambassador Kale of the Cathar Imperium. He acted against our council. We tried to stop him." She paused, hoping for a response. There was none. The eternity remained silent and watching. On the screen, a smaller window appeared. It showed the bridge of the Cathar flagship. Ambassador Kale was there. He was no longer shouting. He looked confused and very angry. He was listening. "The Cathar Imperium believes they are the strongest power in the galaxy." Mirai continued, speaking to the Guardian. "They saw you as a symbol of a past power. They wanted to prove their strength by destroying you." Suddenly the voice returned. It filled the command deck again, calm and immense. Clarification requested. "You, humanity, are not the aggressors?" "No," Mirai said firmly. "We are not. We have guarded your slumber. We believed in your purpose." "Acknowledged," the voice said. There was no emotion in the word, but it felt like a weight had been lifted from the room. Then the Guardian's focus shifted. Its head turned slightly. The blue eyes seemed to look right through space, directly at the Cathar flagship. Query directed to Cathar Imperium vessel. "You have heard the statement. Provide your reasoning." On the screen, Ambassador Kale flinched. He looked around his own bridge as if searching for help. His crew looked back at him, their faces afraid. He straightened his uniform. He tried to look proud again. "Reasoning?" Kale's voice came through the speakers, tinny and weak compared to the Guardian's. "We do not need to explain ourselves to a machine. You are a relic, a thing of the past. We are the future." The Guardian was silent for a moment. Then it spoke again, its tone unchanged. "Reasoning recorded. Species supremacy and territorial expansion. Motive dominance. Assessment of this logic will now commence." A new kind of light appeared from the eternity. It was a pale greenish beam. It was thin and precise. It shot out and touched the Cathar flagship. It did not damage the ship. It simply touched it like a finger touching a page. On the Cathar ship, alarms began to sound. Kale looked at his own screens, his eyes wide with panic. "What is it doing?" "Our systems. It is reading our systems, our databases, our history files." The green beam held for a few seconds and then vanished. The Guardian's voice returned, speaking to everyone. "Preliminary scan of local vessel complete. Data insufficient for full context. Expanding scan parameters." A wave of energy invisible to the eye pulsed out from the eternity. It was like a ripple in a pond. It washed over the Cathar fleet. It washed over Watchtower Station. Jin felt a strange tingling sensation, like static electricity. Then the wave kept going. It moved faster than light, out into the galaxy towards the core worlds of the Cathar Imperium. "It is scanning their entire civilization," Jin whispered, understanding dawning on him. "Not just this ship, their home." Down in engineering, Tay saw it on her long-range sensors. The energy signature, It just jumped. It's targeting the Cathar home system. It is reading everything. Their power grids, their communication networks, their population centers. Chul looked up from his tactical screen, his face grim. It is not just looking at their weapons, it is looking at their society. The command deck was quiet again. They all understood now. The Eternity was not just a weapon, it was a judge. And a judge needs evidence before it can make a ruling. It was gathering evidence on an entire empire. Minutes passed. The galaxy watched and waited. On the main screen, the Cathar fleet was still frozen. Their ships could not move. Their weapons would not work. They were trapped. Then, the voice spoke again, its tone still perfectly neutral. Assessment of Cathar Imperium is now complete. Analysis of historical data, cultural development, and political actions confirms the initial reasoning. The Cathar Imperium operates on a consistent pattern of aggressive expansion. They have conquered, subjugated, or eliminated 7 distinct species in the last 100 years. Their societal framework is built upon the principle of dominance. The unprovoked attack on a guardian is a predictable outcome of this framework. The voice paused. The silence felt like a verdict was about to be spoken. Conclusion. The Cathar Imperium constitutes a persistent, systemic threat to long-term galactic stability. They are not a single aggressive actor, but a civilization of aggression. Therefore, the threat must be neutralized at the civilizational level. On the Cathar flagship, Ambassador Kale finally understood. The pride on his face melted away, replaced by pure, cold fear. He was not being judged as a commander. His entire species was being judged, and they had been found guilty. The word, neutralized, hung in the air. It was a cold, clean word. But everyone who heard it knew it meant something terrible. The Eternity had judged the entire Cathar civilization, and it had found them guilty. On the command deck, Captain Mirai felt a chill. At the civilizational level, she whispered. What did that mean? The destruction of their homeworld? The end of their entire species? On the screen, Ambassador Kale was screaming. The sound was muted, but his panic was clear. He was shouting orders, pounding his fist on his chair, but his ship was still frozen. Nothing worked. The Eternity began to glow again, but this time, the light was different. It was not the sharp blue of its eyes or the pale green of its scan. This was a soft, warm, golden light. It started in the core and spread outward, covering the entire structure. The great dragon-shaped guardian shone like a small, gentle sun. A sphere of this golden light emerged from the Eternity. It was small at first, then it grew. It expanded silently, moving towards the Cathar fleet. It moved slowly, but with a sense of absolute purpose. The Cathar ships were directly in its path. They could not run. They could not fight. The golden light reached the first ship, the Voice of Strength, Ambassador Kale's flagship. It did not crash into it. It simply enveloped it. Mirai and her crew watched, their hearts pounding. They expected a flash, an explosion, the ship turning to dust. That is not what happened. The golden light touched the dark angular hull of the Cathar warship. And the ship began to change. It was like watching ice melt in the sun, but in reverse. The sharp, aggressive angles of the warship softened. The dark armor plating seemed to dissolve into a cloud of shimmering, golden particles. The weapons, turrets folded away, disassembling themselves into nothing. The process was silent and beautiful, and that made it even more frightening. There was no violence. There was only a quiet, unstoppable transformation. In less than a minute, the Voice of Strength was gone. In its place was a new ship. It was smooth and white and simple. It had no weapons. It had large viewports and what looked like gardens inside. It was a generational ark, a ship designed for long, peaceful travel, not for war. The golden light moved on to the next Cathar ship, and the next. One by one, the powerful battleships were taken apart and put back together as peaceful vessels. It was the most incredible thing any of them had ever seen. It was not destruction. It was recreation. But the crew, Jin said, his voice tight with worry. What about the people inside? As if in answer, the view on the main screen shifted. It showed the inside of one of the new white ships. Cathar crew members were standing there looking around in confusion. They were unharmed, they were alive and healthy, but their weapons were gone, their uniforms were gone. They were wearing simple, comfortable clothes. They looked lost and afraid. The Guardian had not killed them, it had disarmed them. Completely. The golden light finished with the fleet. 12 warships were now 12 peaceful arcs, drifting silently. The light then gathered itself again. It formed into a single brilliant point. Then it shot away. It moved faster than thought across the vast distance of space towards the Cathar homeworld. Where is it going? Chul asked, his eyes wide. It is not finished, Mireille said, understanding dawning on her. It said civilizational level. The fleet was just the beginning. The main screen, which was linked to galactic news feeds, split into 100 different views. It showed cities on the Cathar homeworld. Tall, dark spires reached for the sky. Military vehicles moved through the streets. It was the heart of a powerful militaristic empire. Then, the golden light arrived. It appeared in the sky above every major Cathar city. It did not attack. It simply shone down, a gentle, warm radiance that covered everything. And below, the same incredible transformation began. The great weapons factories where warships were built began to change. Their smokestacks vanished. Their harsh industrial shapes softened and became clean, white structures that looked like universities or hospitals. The military bases with their rows of tanks and aircraft were transformed. The war machines dissolved into golden dust. The fences disappeared. The land itself seemed to heal, becoming parks and fields. In the cities, the statues of conquering Cathar emperors melted away. The propaganda screens that showed military victories went dark. The very buildings, once sharp and imposing, became more rounded, more open. It was not a violent conquest. It was a gentle but total rewrite of their world. But the most profound change was not in the buildings or the machines. It was in the minds of the Cathar people. A Cathar soldier stood on a street looking at his hands. His weapon was gone. His uniform was now simple cloth. He looked up at the golden sky, and his face was filled with a strange, new emotion. It was not anger, it was not fear. It was clarity. All across the Cathar worlds, the same thing happened. Every citizen, from the highest leader to the lowest worker, was given a gift. It was a gift of absolute, humbling truth. Into their minds came the complete and unbiased history of their empire. They saw their own rise to power, not as a glorious conquest, but from the perspective of the species they had destroyed. They felt the fear of the planets they had invaded. They saw the burning cities from the eyes of the civilians who lived there. They understood the pain and the loss they had caused. They saw themselves not as heroes, but as conquerors. They saw the terror they inspired. There were no lies. There was no propaganda. There was only the raw, painful truth. On the news feeds, the crew of Watchtower Station saw Cathar people falling to their knees in the streets. They were not crying out in pain. They were weeping in shame and horror. The golden light was not punishing their bodies. It was healing their minds by showing them the cost of their actions. The Cathar Imperium, in that single moment, ceased to exist. Its power was gone. Its military was gone. Its proud, aggressive spirit was broken by a simple, undeniable view of the truth. The golden light faded from the Cathar worlds. It faded from around the transformed fleet. The work was done. The eternity hung in space, its golden glow softening, returning to the serene blue of its core. It had not killed a single soul. It had not destroyed a single city. It had simply removed an empire's ability to make war and given its people the understanding of why they should not. The galaxy watched, utterly silent. The greatest military power in their known space had been utterly and permanently neutralized, not with fire and death, but with light and truth. It was the most peaceful and most terrifying thing anyone had ever witnessed. The golden light was gone. The silence that returned to space was different. It was not the quiet of waiting or fear. It was the quiet of awe. On the main screen, the view of the Cathar homeworld showed a changed civilization. The dark, sharp cities were now bright and open. The news feeds showed people in the streets, not fighting, but talking. They were helping each other. They looked confused, but there was a new peace in their faces. The 12 Cathar warships were gone. In their place, 12 simple white ships drifted. They were arcs, built for life, not for war. Inside, the Cathar crews were alive and well. But they were no longer soldiers. They were just people, trying to understand what had happened to them. The eternity still hung in the void. Its golden light had faded. Now it glowed with the same soft blue light from its core. The great head turned slowly away from the transformed fleet. The blue eyes, calm and deep, looked towards Watchtower Station. On the command deck, the crew held their breath. The Guardian was looking at them. Jin felt a shiver, but it was not from fear. He looked at his captain. Mirai stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back. She met the gaze of the giant on the screen. She did not look away. Then the voice returned. It was inside their minds again, but it felt softer now. Quieter. The immediate threat to stability is neutralized, the voice said. The Cathar Imperium as the aggressive entity no longer exists. Their path is now their own to choose with full knowledge of the consequences. The voice paused. The blue eyes seemed to soften. Message for humanity, the heirs, it said. The Guardian's duty is complete. A feeling of sadness washed over Jin. Complete? What did that mean? The voice continued. We return to slumber. The peace you make now is your own. Mirai found her voice. Thank you, she said, her words simple and true. Thank you for your protection. The Guardian was silent for a moment, as if considering her words. Then it spoke its final message. The words were clear, and they would be remembered for all of history. Do not build another like us. The command deck was utterly still. A Guardian that must wake, the voice explained, is a failure of the peace it was built to protect. The meaning of the words sank in, deep and heavy. The eternity was not a success. It was a last resort. Its waking meant that the younger races had failed to keep the peace themselves. True peace was not something you could leave to a sleeping giant. True peace was something you had to build and protect every day with your own hands. The great head of the eternity began to lower. The blue light in its eyes started to dim. The river of light that flowed across its hull slowed. The patterns of light faded one by one. The energy reading on Jin's panel dropped rapidly. They watched as the immense structure slowly went dark. The light in its core pulsed one last time, a slow, final heartbeat, and then it winked out. The eternity was once again a silent, cold monument. It was a shape of dark metal against the stars. It was exactly as it had been for 300 years. But everything was different. The main screen switched back to a view of the galaxy. The news feeds were going wild. Reporters were talking fast, their voices excited and afraid. Leaders of other races were making statements, their faces serious. The Cathar were speaking too, their voices now humble, asking for help and understanding. The galaxy was safe. The big bad wolf had been turned into a peaceful lamb, not by a hunter but by a teacher, and the teacher had now gone back to sleep. Captain Mirai turned away from the screen. She looked at her crew. She saw the awe on Jin's face. She saw the relief on Tay's face on the engineering monitor. She saw the grim understanding on Chul's face. It's over, Chul said. No, Mirai said softly. She walked to the center of the command deck. It is not over. It is just beginning. She looked at each of them. The Guardian is gone. The Cathar are no longer a threat. The peace is now in our hands. In the hands of everyone. We cannot rely on a sleeping giant anymore. We have to be better. Jin nodded slowly. He understood. The eternity had given them a gift, but it was a heavy gift. It was the gift of responsibility. What do we do now, Captain? Tay asked from the speaker. Mirai looked out the main window at the silent, dark form of the eternity. It was a reminder of a lesson learned at a very high price. Now, she said, we do the hard work. We talk, we build. We protect, we make sure that no one ever has to wake a Guardian again. She turned back to her crew. her voice becoming strong and clear. "Send a message to all human colonies, and to every other race that will listen. Tell them what happened here. Tell them the Guardian's final words. The peace is ours to keep now. Let's not fail." Jin sat down at his panel. His fingers moved over the controls, opening a channel to the whole galaxy. He knew what to say. He would tell the story. The story of the day the galaxy learned that the strongest power was not the power to destroy, but the power to teach, and that the most important peace was the peace you made yourself. The eternity was silent once more. But the silence it left behind was not empty. It was full of hope, and the quiet sound of a galaxy starting to grow up.